All right, 15 minutes of heat presented by Broward Health. Broward Health celebrating 85 years of service to our community. Then, now, forever, Broward Health. I'm going to read you something from Ira Winderman, and then Solano will get you caught up on the heat and the NBA trade deadline, although we talked about it in the headlines in the last segment. But there's a couple questions that got sent in to Ira Winderman in the Sun Sentinel today. First one, hey, Ira, I believe one of the Heat's disadvantages is that their two primary stars, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, are not three-point threats. They have to burn energy and clock to work hard for their three-point plays compared to opposing an efficient three. And here's what Ira responds. I think it's a valid response, and this happens to be the response for several questions that Ira gets, criticisms about the Heat. It's not as if Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo weren't the focus of the offense previously when the Heat went to the 2020 NBA Finals and then came within a win last season of the Finals. Yes, it is a more difficult way to win, but if there are ample three-pointers mixed in, it can still be an effective approach. The problem is that while Jimmy and Bam are converting their shots at an efficient rate, the three-point shooters are not. Plus, if the Heat's three-point shooters were more effective, it is possible that Jimmy and Bam would defer to such shots more often. The Heat attempted 35.8 three-pointers per game last season and are at 35.1 this season. So the shot menu has not changed dramatically in that regard. What has changed is the lousy three-point shooting. And so it's a great point from Ira, which is, again, we try to pick and poke what's wrong with the roster and how does the roster need to be reconstructed and what is the weakness of having, say, Jimmy and Bam as your 1 and 2. And he points out there's really not that much wrong with the way that it's constructed or with having Jimmy and Bam as your 1 and 2. The problem is if you can't hit your threes, then that roster construct needs help. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about yesterday with Will Manso when I was saying, so you go out and you get some three-point or some shooting help. What's to say that Duncan doesn't come back from the injury and start lighting it up again? Or what's to say Max Strus doesn't go through one of his hot streaks again? So I think Ira brings up a good point, which is the roster is really not constructed that poorly, but the guys, aside from Jimmy and Bam, have to hit threes. If they don't, that's the flaw.
A lot of those answers, and not just Ira saying it in a different way, it's just guys underperforming. Like, I don't know why fans, like, they get taken back that this guy can do that, but he's not doing that. Currently, he's not doing that. But he was there to do that. Like, they're just underperforming. It's a number of people, including Kyle Lowry, who's underperforming. That's the answer to their problem, to be honest.
Because it's not rocket scientist. Like, not rocket science when you look at it. Like, your three-pointers need to hit three-pointers. If they're not, you're missing a big part of the way the team is constructed. And so, yeah, Max Strus underperforming. Duncan Robinson underperformed when he was out there. I mean, he played himself to the back of the bench. He was so bad. So I don't know if there's anything, that monumental that needs to take place other than the guys you're counting on to perform shooting three-pointers need to hit three-pointers.
That's it. And it's funny that you say they're shooting just as many, but they're not scoring as many points. They're not hitting shots like that. If Jimmy doesn't drive and get and ones, Jimmy Butler's not Jimmy Butler anymore. If Duncan can't shoot a three, he doesn't even be on the court. That's just, it's the way it is. You do what you do on a team. You get set in that slot. And if you can't perform in that manner, that's going to hurt the team. It's obvious.
Guys, outside of PJ Tucker, think about this. It's the same roster from last season. They were the number 1 three-point shooting team in terms of percentage last year. Number 1. They're shooting the same volume of three-pointers this season, give or take a couple, right? It's in the same neighborhood, and they're 28th, third worst in the NBA. Make that make sense. It doesn't, which is why when I see what the Heat were probably thinking a couple months ago, which was, oh, this will turn around, right? Like the floodgates will open. Spo said that a couple times. At some point, the floodgates will open. They just haven't. And if you look at their roster, 13-12 against teams that entered yesterday with a losing record. So teams not above 500. 13-12. That's not good. That's 500 against teams that are worse than 500. But if they had knocked down threes in those games and not hit 6 to 10 threes, but more comparable to last season, 13 to 15 threes per game, guess what? Their record is probably much better than it is right now. That's a big if, but I'm just saying it probably is.
Yeah. So Duncan, do your damn job,
Well,
boy.
it's not that far from being that simple. Like, Duncan, you're getting a lot of money. I understand he's injured. You're getting a lot of money to hit threes. Hit threes. If you hit threes, we're Gucci. Like
Yes.
that. Like it doesn't need many more changes than that. Hit your threes. And so then I would say to you, is it that far-fetched to believe that he won't be able to come back and start hitting threes? I don't know if it's that far-fetched to think that he won't be able to do that.
The reason I can't just be bullheaded, because I'm hot with Duncan, and we talked about earlier how you get mad when people get big contracts. Spo and Pat believe that he was a special talent shooting those threes. So for them to lock into this guy like that, I have to say something is going on with him. Is it simple as health because he's injured? Is it as simple as something happened to him and he just can't bounce back physically from it? Or is it something mental? Or the thing you don't want to talk about with players, did he get his money and kind of hang it up? And I know that's not a popular thing to say, but I know names of guys that play differently once they got $40, $50 million than when they did when they were making $100,000 a year.
I've noticed your graphic name there says Buttfoot.
Yes. You like it?
Here's the other question that Ira got today in the Sun Sentinel that I thought was interesting. Is everyone, because we talk about Kyle Lowry, they say he's going to miss the next 3 games for sure. Is everyone being too hard on Kyle Lowry? This year, the Heat moved Tyler Hero into the starting lineup. You have Bam Adebayo coming into his own. Jimmy Butler needs the ball. Then you have to get the 3-point shooters in the game. Lowry was the number 1 or number 2 option in his team for most of his career. He had ice in his veins. He had been tasked with getting everyone involved on a team that has a lot of ISO and pick and roll plays. I'm not sure anyone else has had to sacrifice their game more. Assuming he doesn't get traded, don't count him out in the playoffs. And Ira says this, yes, it can be argued that Kyle Lowry still is of championship pedigree, but when the first step is lost, so much else is lost. Whether it's the knee or his age, he's 36, he simply does not look like the player he was for the Heat last season. Once the burst is gone, a point guard becomes pedestrian on both ends. So what do you think it is for Kyle Lowry? Do you think it's just age has caught up with him and that's who he is right now? Or do you think, like the emailer points out, you know what? He had to change his game. And so if you're expecting the same Kyle Lowry that you saw last season or that you saw with Toronto, you're not going to see it because Tyler Hero's in the starting lineup and he's got to keep everyone involved.
Schemes are so interchangeable in the NBA. If he could take over a game, ball dominant, I think Spo's smart enough to put something in to be like, okay, Kyle, go. This is you. Let's see it. I think he's old. I think Toronto used him up, and then once they were done with him, they let him go on and find his ventures and elsewhere in the league. Can he still play? Can he still be a guy on the team? Yes, like he is now. He can go be a backup, but I do think he just got old.
Think he got old, Solana?
Yeah, I mean, I see what the question is asking, and I don't think it's that unfair or I think it's maybe a little fair to give Kyle Lowry a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, right? He is dealing with injury. I think that's important. Like, he is going through an injury, whether we're upset with his play or not. His knee has clearly been bothering him for a while, but more than anything, I just think he's taken a step back. And it's true. You don't need Kyle Lowry to do what he did for you last year. He was really good last year before he got hurt. You don't need him to do that anymore because Tyler Hero needs the ball, and he's a better player at this point in their careers. Jimmy Butler needs the ball. Bam Adebayo needs the ball. Like, you don't need him to be the guy to direct your offense anymore. You need him to score and play really good defense. He can't run anymore, and he can't score consistently anymore because he's old, he's taken a step back, and he's hurt. He's a little washed right now.
Listen to what you just said. Last year, he was good for us before he got hurt. This year, why is he not performing? Because he's hurt. I remember my grandma used to cut her arm. It would bleed for 4 weeks. It never healed. You get old, your body doesn't work the same, man. He's old. Like,
Well, I can tell you the Heat
LeBron's
made
old. KD's getting old.
The Heat made their decision because Kyle Lowry doesn't sniff the court in the fourth quarter anymore. So we can say what we think, and Ira can write what he thinks, but the Heat have made their decision on him. It's been pretty apparent when he's been out there.
He's on the Deadman path.
I don't know about that.
He's making $25 million more than
Yeah.
Denver, bro. That's a much better path to be on.